Welcome to another episode on Genealogy TV. Today we are talking about a Genealogy Master Plan, and we're going to jump into it right now. So let me ask you this. Are you a little frustrated? I see this a lot. A lot of questions come in. They can't find the records. Maybe they're missing records. They have multiple people by the same name. Which one do they put in their records? Are they unorganized? And yeah, is that you? Are you unorganized? Overwhelmed by details? I get it. I've been there. And, you find yourself those little hints that show up in your emails and whatnot, chasing you down rabbit holes and searching for things that are kind of off topic, if you will. And so you're finding yourself spending fruitless hours of research. We're going to get into how to resolve some of those conflicting information, records that you may find, data, facts, that kind of stuff. We're going to get into all of that here right now. We want to create a systematic approach to help you stay focused, right? You're going to create a research plan so that we can then execute that plan with precision. And so let's get started. So my purpose here always, and you'll hear this from other genealogists as well, is to start with a research question. And so, you're kind of going down this one branch, right? Stay focused. We're not chasing all of those. Look at all the leafy hints on my tree. I don't chase those hints, not until I'm ready to research that one person that I'm searching. So I've been working down this path, and I'm working toward Hardy Winslow. Now, Hardy showed up in somebody else's tree at one point. I'm sure decades ago I probably may have imported him, but now I want to prove if Hardy Winslow is in fact the father of Hill Kiah Winslow, which is right here underneath the line, right? So we're going to stay one branch, one ancestor with a clear goal in mind. Okay. So my research method for research notes, I have proven from hundreds of students and through my own research that this works. So we're going to kind of go through some of my research notes, just bits and pieces of it, because it would take me, 4 hours probably to walk you through this whole document. But we're going to talk about research notes, because once you learn this skill, I promise you, if you master research notes, you will master your family tree and you will find your ancestors. Okay? So the Knox Research Method is this. It's really not hard. It's keeping everything in chronological order. This is a game changer the way I do this. Okay? So it's one document per ancestor. Occasionally, if I have like just one or two records about an ancestral couple, I haven't really done my whole full workup on them, I will start a couple's research notes. But for the most part, it always gets broken apart into individual people. Why? Because he and she had lives before and after they were married. So somebody's usually going to die first, and so there's a life after the spouse dies. And they, were children growing up in their parents' households, most likely. And so it could be that we want to keep track of all those records separately. So typically one document per ancestor in chronological order. Whoops, I went too far. Hang on. Let's get back there. All records found are included with proper source citations. So here's the deal. Do you include records not found? We'll talk about that. Okay. So here's a closer look at basically the format, right? You've got research note title across the top with the person's name and their birth year. That's usually the way I start all of my research notes. And a lot of times what I will do is I'll just create a master file and then copy and paste it, like copy it and then edit it for each ancestor as I'm starting to work on them. I include the FamilySearch ID at the top. A lot of times I will use an ancestry link, hyperlinking to that person's profile on my tree. And then it really starts with the year of the event, whatever it is, right? They're born, right? So whatever year that is, what the item is, maybe it's a birth registry, and abstracted information from that record. And this is just fake text I put in here to show you the format. So you have that top section that basically tells you who it is and where they are online. And then you have each item individually in chronological order. And as you do this, especially if you start with the year, you can jump ahead and not have to reread all of your research notes every time you're trying to find something. So it really does help. Now, we're going to go through some examples here as to how that's going to help you. And so let's keep moving on. Oh, and don't forget the source citation. So I do this in Word. Okay, so if you go and insert a footnote, it would be under the References tab if you're using Word, and then you click Insert Footnote, and then you put your source citation. We're not going to get into source citations today. But if you put something there, I found it on Ancestry in the Social Security Death Index. Okay, there's some information that you didn't have before, because when you come back 10 years later and you're looking at this and you're going, where on earth did I get this information? It's in your source citations, because Connie said, put your source citations in there. So please do, because you're going to thank yourself later for doing it. So the idea by using, and you can do the same thing in, I think, Google Docs or whatever format that you're writing this in, because if you use footnotes, the footnotes travel with the paragraph that you are referencing. So because you're not going to find all of your records in chronological order perfectly when you're doing your research. In fact, it's going to be scattered all over the place. So as you're inserting different records in your research notes, the source citations will travel with it. Don't use endnotes. Those are not for genealogy research. Okay, moving on. So the research methods that we are using for these source citations are going to be for all records found, all hints. So you're going to chase those hints. If you find something, you're going to include those records that you're finding, right? You're going to chase all those facts. Now, as far as family goes, I get this question a lot. So as far as the family goes, I often will put a reference in, not the full, birth certificate information about the daughter that was just born. Let's say I'm working in the 1880s or something, and there's a child born. I'm not going to put all of that information, but I may put a reference in that might say, 1880, daughter so-and-so was born, and maybe a source citation from my other notes for that daughter, because it's just kind of helpful. It's kind of like turning on the family events on Ancestry so that you can see those family events in the timeline. All records not found only after reasonably exhaustive research. So if you are looking for, let's say, the 1840 census, and you're searching all over the place and you cannot find it, I will make a reference in my research notes. It says 1840 census not found after reasonably exhaustive research. That's usually all I will say, and I will bold that in red because I want to point that out, because I may want to come back to that later after I get more information. I learn a little bit more. It's like, oh, he moved to another county. Let's go look over there. So it could be that I can find it later, but I want to put that in red, those records not found that I would expect to find. So, yeah. Fan club members if needed. So fan club, if you're not familiar with the fan club, is friends, associates, and neighbors. And those, and some people include the family in that. We've already talked about the family, but friends, associates, and neighbors, I will include those in the research notes if I'm seeing them often. There's a great story for this particular ancestor, happens to be Christopher Madsen. I realize you can't read that. Don't worry about it. It's not important. Point being is, he had a friend, his name was Chris Tiegner, and he kept popping up in these records and newspaper articles and things. And I'm like, who is this guy? So I researched him. He turns out to be the tie that puts a whole bunch of the story together for this family. So If you start seeing somebody frequently showing up, make sure that, they're showing up in your research notes. Now, things like transcripts and abstracts and other special projects are going to be done in a separate document, and those fan club members, because you transcribed it, they're probably going to be in those documents anyway. You could probably search your documents for those members. So what about maps and images? I personally, especially if it looks cool, I like to put the images and maps in here, especially if it helps me with my research and tells the story. So in this case, I have an image of a ship because I thought it was fun. That's what genealogy is all about, right? All right, so let's talk about the trifecta strategy. This is something I developed a long time ago, and I don't talk about it very often, but it's a really good strategy for how to do research. So here's the deal. It is working off of 3 to the third power. So what is 3 to the third power, you ask? Well, that's 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. 27 is not that important, but boy, wouldn't it be cool if you come up with 27 records for this research you're about to do. So this will help maximize your results. So here's the deal. So the trifecta strategy does this. It uses 3 different platforms, 3 different searches in 3 different ways. And if you remember nothing else, remember that. 3 platforms, 3 searches in 3 different ways. Okay? And so where is one of the places that you're going to start looking, right? So 3 different platforms, meaning Ancestry, FamilySearch, and one other of your choice. So the one other of your choice, it needs to be logical with regard to your research question. So if you are doing something and you're working on this one search and you're going, okay, I've looked on Ancestry, looked on FamilySearch, where else could it be? Maybe the state archives, maybe the county library. I'm looking for land records. Let's go to the county courthouse. That's logical. Okay, so that third place might be whatever is logical for the current search that you're doing. The other component of the trifecta strategy are the types of searches. So of course you're going to chase those hints first. Then you're going to do search from the profile of your ancestor on the platform that you're actually all 3 platforms, if that's possible. And doing targeted research. By that, I mean going to the card catalog or going to maybe the research wiki or going to some of the special functions in FamilySearch and doing some specific research. So using that example of trying to find somebody in the 1840 census before, if I'm striking out from the hints and from the search from the ancestor profile, I am now going to go to Ancestry's card catalog and I'm going to specifically search census records, specifically in the location, specifically for 1840, and I'm going to peruse those records hoping to find my ancestor. If he's not there, he might be in a neighboring county, so keep that in mind. All right, so then the criteria would be you're now searching in 3 different ways. You're using name, you're searching a place. Now, when I say place, keep this in mind. Try searching without the name, but search the place. Because you may find, oh, there's 4 different microfilm rolls for this county. Okay. Maybe he's on one of the other microfilm rolls because his name is spelled goofy or something. It didn't transcribe properly or whoever indexed it, okay? And then you're also going to search time. And by time, I'm going to give a couple caveats here. We want to search the event, but we also want to search the history of the area without the name. Why? Because things are happening. Let's say we're trying to find someone in 1862 in North Carolina. Well, that's during the Civil War. Maybe he left. Maybe we're trying to find a newspaper article in 1862 that relates to an event for my ancestor in North Carolina, and all of a sudden I go, well, wait a minute. Did that newspaper actually exist in 1862? So if we're searching for the entity, right, in this case a newspaper, in 1862, and it doesn't exist, I went and did the research on one of my ancestors, and sure enough, the newspaper shut down during the Civil War because he was afraid of his newspaper building being burned down. So they just shut down the newspaper during a few years during the Civil War and opened up again afterwards. All right, so long story short, with the Trifecta Strategy, it's 3 platforms, 3 different types of searches in 3 different ways, okay? You're going to maximize your results. It's the whole idea behind the Trifecta Strategy is to bend your thinking a little bit, to try and get you outside of the comfort zone that you're always in. Like, let's say you're always on Ancestry alone. If you're not on FamilySearch, you should be, because it's free, and boy, is it a resource. I'll show you some examples of how this works a little bit later. Okay, so we've got some new modern tools. We're not going to get into that too much today, but we've got DNA testing. We've got AI assistance now that is doing some really remarkable things. We have handwriting recognition, which is just incredible. And then, digital archives. This screenshot, by the way, is not even noted here, but this is from Transcribus, I guess is how it's pronounced, where it is taking a handwritten document and transcribing it so you can copy and paste it. This was one of the students that asked me this, and we went through and kind of did this quick little exercise, and sure enough, it works great. So that's transcribus.com, I think it is. All right, moving on. So let's get into the kind of the basics of beyond the basics and dig a little deeper. The types of records you might be able to find is church records, land records, newspapers, court documents, military records, probate records, city directories, yearbooks. Especially if you're trying to find someone in the 1900s, the early 1900s, yearbooks are a great place to go. Federal census, state census, cemetery, funeral, find a grave, billion graves, all of those kinds of burial records. Death indexes, specifically in the United States, the Social Security Death Index is one. There's actually 2. And I didn't even list them here. The Social Security Death Index and the Social Security Applications and Claims Index. Those are 2, just search them both. If you're looking for somebody after 1935, 1936, somewhere in there, when the Social Security applications, when they, created the Social Security Administration, and people started filling that information out to get a Social Security card. So there are 2 different indexes. While some of the information crosses over, there is different information in both of the indexes. Is your ancestor going to be in both of them? Not necessarily, but there is a good portion of them that overlap. All right, archives, local, state, national, check those out. Societies. These could be genealogical societies, historical societies, the DAR, the SAR, all of those different groups have records a lot of times, and they can be very helpful. Vital records, birth, marriage, death, and divorce. Now, I included divorce in the vital record list here only because I think of it as a vital record. It's not really. It's evidence of marriage when you find a divorce record, but the divorce records are actually court records, and that's where you would look for them. And of course, you want to ask family and talk to family about your family history, because they may have something that you're not aware of. Okay? Let's talk about special projects for a minute, because special projects are going to be something aside from your research notes. And so perhaps you are doing DNA research or something, or a variety of things. We'll talk about some special projects. So they could be something like DNA matches. So in this example, and I know you can't see it, don't worry about it, but all of these colored boxes on here are down at the bottom, toward the bottom, are DNA cousins with their centimorgan amounts in them as they relate to me. And I was trying to solve a problem to try and figure out who the father of my great-grandfather was, using DNA to see if I could find what I called hot zones. And so the circles are hot zones. And basically what this is it's a hierarchy. So you've got all of the children of my great-great-grandfather, And then I'm trying to figure out which one of the men could be the father of my great grandfather. So I'm like looking at all the descendants from all of those people. Special project. That's what I mean by this. So I was trying to figure it out using an Excel spreadsheet. These days, I don't necessarily always do this on Excel. I often will use Lucidchart for something like this. You could be doing fan club research. So you're trying to generate something that shows the community in which your ancestors live, friends, associates, and neighbors, remember. Thanks to Elizabeth Schoen Mills for that acronym. Immigration research. So this could be immigration records with an I, right? They're arriving to whatever their new country is. Emigration with an E, meaning they're leaving. So a lot of times there are records in both places, the arriving country and the departing country. There could be naturalization records, right? And in the United States, there's usually 2 sets of those records if they finished their naturalization process. So there was first papers and second papers or final papers, however you want to call it. And so there may be this whole immigration study that you do, again, in a separate document from your research notes, but your abstracted information may become included in your research notes, okay? You may want to do a local history study because you need to understand what was going on in the area in which your ancestors lived. I have done this whole thing recently where I've been tracing generations through land records. Why? Because FamilySearch has this new full text search, and I'm finding more land records than I ever found before. Now, once I find some deeds or land records in the full text search, a lot of times I will go to the county and search it, and then you can do special projects like this where you're mapping it out. Resolving conflicts is another one. So it could be that you have multiple, things aren't adding up. You're going to see a story about where I have an ancestor who has some wives that are confusing to me. So we'll talk about that. And then you may want to transcribe some of the important records, things like wills and deeds and that kind of stuff. You want to transcribe that stuff, abstract that into your research notes. Photo analysis is another special project. So you might want to take a photograph. In this case, we were doing an episode with the photo detective, Maureen Taylor, and we were going through this image and we were looking at all the images in the background of this image. I realize you can't see that image very well, but that was my great-great-grandfather, Christopher Madsen, and his wife, Laura. And so we were trying to see if we could get any more information out of that photograph. Okay, so that might be a special project. All right, so here's some tips for the master plan, right? Keep it current as much as you can. Now, as you're growing your library of research notes across all your different ancestors, you may come across something new, open up that research note, add it in, save it, close it, you're done, okay? So you're going to be updating that regularly, and occasionally you want to go back and take a look at it to see if there's anything new. So for example, Ancestry, FamilySearch, MyHeritage, all of them are uploading billions of records every day. And so there is new stuff to find. And so you'll be updating that from time to time. Be flexible and didn't really list it here, but try and avoid confirmation bias. So that is when you suspect that, in this case, Hardy Winslow is the father of Hill Kiah Winslow. And we want to avoid trying to force fit the records to make that hypothesis work. That's confirmation bias. So we want to try and prove and disprove just equally as much as possible. So your goals may adjust over time. And complete your research notes on each ancestor. I suggest, this is the way I do it, you do you. I usually will focus on one ancestor at a time until I've got everything I possibly can before moving on. And so that way you can prove your next ancestor. Okay? Then once you do, you rinse and repeat. Okay? So now the master plan, this actually is kind of a hybrid, very close to what the Association of Professional Genealogists use as their methodology for a plan, but that is to create a research question. I gather and organize in there, right? And then you want to start research notes. So a couple of these are my own. Then you want to, create that research plan within your research notes. We'll talk about that. Evidence evaluation is where you're taking individual documents and you're looking at each one. What is it? Is it an index? Is it a copy? Is it a clerk's copy? Is it a photograph? Is it, what is it? So we're evaluating it for its merits so that we can help prove or disprove how accurate this document may be. Then we're correlating multiple documents, and then we're resolving conflicts. So it always starts with a research question. So this is my master plan kind of beefed up a little bit. So we're going to gather and organize. We're going to create those research notes. We're going to create a plan. I'll talk about that in a second. We're going to do research. You've seen this probably from other genealogists as well. It's not just a search, it is research. We're targeting research. We're thinking about what it is that we need and going after it to find it and add that information back into our research notes every time we find something. We're evaluating those records. We're correlating that evidence, and we are trying to come to a resolution and conclusion. So, hey, we're going to get back to that video here in just a moment, but I want to let you know that Genealogy TV has a website, a newsletter, and a Facebook page. Links for all of that are in the show notes below. All right, let's get back to it. Here's the story. The question, using the master plan now, is who is Hardy Winslow, and is he the father of Hill Kiah Winslow? So Hardy is my question. And so we're going to gather and organize everything we can on the younger generation first. I'm not jumping into research notes on Hardy Winslow. I'm trying to determine, do I have everything for Hill Kiah Winslow, his son, supposedly, if Hardy is actually his father? So we start research notes for Hill Kiah. We are creating a plan to determine what is missing as we are going through and we flush out all of the records that we have. What's missing, right? Then we start our targeted research using the Trifecta Strategy, and we do that and we find everything we can. That is called reasonably exhaustive research. And then we add that into our research notes again as we go. So it's the research notes, I always like to say the research notes are a constant evolution, like they are constantly evolving and changing and adding, and you're putting your thoughts in there as well. And so one of the reasons why you do this is because if you add your own thoughts in there, you come back a few months later and you've forgotten where you were and you want to pick up with what you left off with, and you're going, okay, wait a minute. Why did I put this in here? If you have your thoughts in there, I think it was this or this, then you've got some reasoning, and others may find that as well when you are handing off your research notes to somebody else. So you want to transcribe and abstract your information into your research notes. Now, I don't put full transcriptions in my research notes, just FYI. I usually do that in a separate document. Sometimes I will put it into my research notes if it's not too long. So then we're going to evaluate those records. We're going to correlate the collection of records, but only as it relates to our research question. So as we're doing this master plan, yes, we're putting everything into our research notes for Hill Kiah Winslow, but the correlation part, we're only pulling those records as it relates to our question about Hardy Winslow, okay? And then we're going to try and come to a resolution or conclusion to determine if Hardy Winslow is in fact the father of Hill Kiah. If you're finding any value in this so far, I hope you'll subscribe and give me a thumbs up. I would appreciate it. All right, let's talk about Hill Kiah. So this is an AI-generated image. You will see a few of these in here. I just like the visual. But the records, I promise you, are real. They are not AI-generated, but the faces, because I don't have any images of Hill Kiah. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to be talking about resolving some conflicts using various resources, but we're also chasing that research question about Hardy Winslow. All right, research notes help tell the story of Hill Kiah Winslow. So these are the research notes that I had collected to date for Hill Kiah Winslow. They're 11 pages long and growing. And so some of these little excerpts I literally am copying and pasting them out of my research notes to help give you a sense of how these are written. In this presentation, it is not everything, I promise you. There's no way we could possibly go through all of his research notes today, but it will help pull it together enough that you'll get an idea. So according to his tombstone and a cemetery inscription, he was born on the 23rd of October, 1831. And I put a note in here that says the census records don't match. His age is all over the place. He likely didn't know when he was born. Of course, a tombstone, he's dead at this point. It's his family who doesn't really know, right? Several census records show he was born in North Carolina, but specifically it is not known. It is likely Randolph County because that's where his presumed father, Hardy G. Winslow, was at the time. Okay. So another piece of the research that I did that I had in my research notes was the 1850 census. Again, as you can see, I'm starting with the date and the item. So it's the 25th of October, 1850 US Census. I put Hill Kiah in quotes here because it's spelled slightly different than some other records. And a lot of times I'll tell you now, spoiler alert, a lot of his records are H.K. Winslow, which gives me the impression that Hill and Kiah are two different names, a first name and a middle name. And in some records, he's actually referred to as Hill. So he probably went by Hill. But in this case, it was Hill Kiah Winslow. He's 18 years old in Randolph County, North Carolina, with presumed family Hardy Winslow. Now, I put that in there because I didn't want to assume, because in 1850, the relationship is not noted in the census records, okay? And I went on to mention that, there's a presumed mother and some other children. Hardy Winslow's land is worth $750. Ding, 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 ding. That means there's going to be land records to go find. And so this is the Southern Division of Randolph County. I made a note of that. So there could be deeds to go find. So something to think about, right? In 1860, H.K. Winslow is in the Western Division. Post Office, Asheboro, North Carolina. H.K. was 29 years old, living with his assumed family, Hardy G. Winslow, his assumed mother, Christiana, and so on. There's other family member here. There is no relationship noted for Adeline Phillips, who has a different last name, and his children to the head of household. However, he is listed as a farm laborer. Hardy Winslow owns his farm and is valued at $2640. So here's Hardy and here's H.K. Winslow. Okay. And he's got personal value here, so that's probably a horse or something. I don't know. Okay, moving on. So now in 1860, we find him in a grantor state bond. This is a land record. I found this at the Registrar of Deeds in the county courthouse records online. And here's H.K. Winslow. This is actually the last page. I just wanted to point that out. And so I have the bond, the book number, page number, and all that, not properly transcribed at this time. This is notes to myself that I need to go do this because I haven't finished the transcription of this. This is actually a real project in progress. So you're seeing it as I'm doing this, kind of, sort of. All right, so then I find Hill Kiah in 1861 in a Civil War Enlistment record. Now, how do I know this is my guy? First of all, there's a lot of records that are listed where he is listed as H.K. Winslow. and he's from Randolph County, North Carolina. So the way you do this, if you're not sure, is to go research the whole county and see how many people have that same name. And a lot of times you can figure that out. So one of the reasons why I put this in here is because it says see original records at the North Carolina Archive. So during my research, I came to the conclusion that the actual record, not just this index, this was from a printed book, I think, that I want to go see the record. It's at the archives. It's not online. I need to go to the North Carolina State Archives and find this record. Okay. So that's one reason why I did that. Well, that led me to a special project. Aside from my research notes, I went and created a listing in chronological order of all of the Civil War records that I found for this ancestor. And as I'm going through, I discover in 1862 he was captured at the Battle of Roanoke Island in North Carolina. I'm like, well, that's interesting. And then on September 25th, there was an entry that he had deserted. Then there was an entry on the same date in another record, said he was thrown out of the Confederacy. And by the way, earlier he had been paroled in what do they call it? A prisoner exchange. And so he is then mustered out on the same day, 25th of September, 1862. So I think he got tossed out for disobedience or something. I'm not sure. So long story short, he is out of the service. And so I had this whole little special project set aside for him. So now in 1863, we find him buying land. Again, I made a note in red in my research notes to go find this bond at the North Carolina State Archive. So guess what? I'll be heading to the North Carolina State Archive soon. So let's see. He is just noted in the sale of property for the estate of Ezra Beckerdite. Have no clue, never heard of this person before. All right, so I have some notes here. Then on 26 September 1863, there is a marriage bond for Mary Hale. So this is an ancestry entry, and it gives me the bond number 115214, 115214. It's right there, and I'm like, cool. Now I need to go find the record. I don't ever stop with indexes. Where there's an index, there might be an original record, so we want to go find it whenever possible if it has survived. So then, with that same information, I go digging on FamilySearch, and I actually find an image of the index, and it says book number 2, page 46. Yay! Again, I need to go find this at the North Carolina Archive, so I've now got the bond number, book and page, from 2 different sources, and this is using the trifecta strategy, right? We've got 3 different locations, Ancestry, FamilySearch, and it's going to be the North Carolina Archives as it pertains to this specific marriage. Okay, so we have Mary Hale marrying Hill Kiah Winslow. And then in 1876, she dies in Cleveland County. But wait, my guy was in Randolph County. What happened? So I'm like starting to get lost. Well, I find the Back Creek monthly meetings. These guys were Quakers. At least originally they were Quakers. And so there's extra records there for me to go search. And that record is in Randolph County, North Carolina, but it makes reference to her death in Shelby County, in Cleveland County, Shelby, North Carolina. So I'm like, okay, so she's buried here. So let's think about this. This is why research notes are so great. We start thinking in chronological order. She dies in 1876. If you notice on this tombstone, he doesn't die till 1901. Okay. And this cemetery is in Cleveland County, North Carolina. Well, how on earth did they get from Randolph County to Cleveland County? All right, stick with me for a minute. In 1878, I find a marriage index for H.K. Winslow to A.S. Spurlin, both white, in Cleveland County. And I'm like, wait a minute, H.K. Winslow, A.S. Spurlin. This is not making sense. Huh? Uh-oh. See if there's a record for a marriage bond for Mary Spurlin. So I did some research and I discover that there might be another marriage. I'm not sure. So going through my research notes again, I'm kind of going, oh, wait a minute. I'm finding more records. Now I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Okay. Long story short is he married two women by the same name. Mary C. Hale and Mary Ann Spurlin. Okay. So what happened, using my research notes helped me figure this out. What happened was, first wife dies in 1876. There's more to this story, so stick with me for a minute. She dies in 1876 and he buries her in Cleveland County. Now he's not dead yet. So my theory is that he bought a plot of land for him and his wife and he put her there and he, created a tombstone. It's got her information on top or on the bottom. This is probably blank in 1876, waiting for him. Okay, this is my theory. I'm assuming it's right. Well, then I started doing land record research using the FamilySearch full text search and the county library and the county online repository, and I found that there were some land transactions that led me from Randolph County to Cleveland County. Well, how did that happen? Well, going through the master plan again, we got to stay focused on what we're doing, right? We're going to plan within the research notes. We're going to execute that with all of this in mind. So, have I tied Hardy Winslow yet to Hill Kiah Winslow? No, I really haven't. Right? So I have a new AI image for you. We're pretending this is Hardy Winslow. The dates are real. The images are not. Okay. So it's questionable right now because we have some of the early census records. I have all of Hill Kiah Winslow in research notes at this point. And the early census records show Hill Kiah Winslow, but there's no relationships noted in census records in the United States prior to 1880. So 1870, Hill Kiah Winslow is the head of household. Hardy Winslow is in the household, but he's 80 years old. So I'm like, what's going on here? So 1840 through 1870, they're together in all of those census records, but the relationship is not noted. So Hardy Winslow could be an uncle for all I know. So I really haven't proven anything yet. So just a note, Hill Kiah was number 14 of 16 children. Holy cow, the man was busy. Poor wife. So let's do a little more research. So in June of 1872, there's land transaction for 230 acres. Hardy G. Winslow, for and in consideration of the sum of $1,700 to him in hand paid by said Hill Kiah Winslow, in receipt whereof hereby fully acknowledged. All right, so he sold the land. Hardy sold the land to Hill Kiah. Does that prove the relationship? Not yet. There's nothing about father-son relationship there. So in December of 1872, Hardy Winslow dies. Now I put father here because I copied this right out of my research notes. So spoiler alert, we do figure this out. But at this point, do you know this? No, really, we don't, right? So in 1873, H.K. Winslow, who's the seller, and his wife Mary in Randolph County sell that land just 3 weeks after his father's death. And then in May 1874, H.K. Winslow buys land for $200 in Cleveland County. So the land records are taking me there. And so then I realized, well, wait a minute. Now, just a couple years later, Mary Hale, that's her maiden name, dies in Cleveland County. That's the tombstone that you saw. Now, is this normal? this path I'm taking you on that's kind of going back and forth, and you're probably going, well, wait a minute, we're skipping around. Well, yeah, that's how the research typically comes about, right? We don't find everything in perfect chronological order as we're researching. So, Mary dies. She's buried in Cleveland County, North Carolina. Again, there's the tombstone. All right, so now I start doing the whole master plan idea for Hardy Winslow, because I've already done all the research I can for Hill Kiah. I'm still trying to prove Hardy, but I have so much information that names Hardy. Let's go see if we can find Hardy and prove this relationship. So I start working on Hardy, and I discover a probate package for Hardy Winslow, and it names Hill Kiah Winslow. Now, this is quite a package, a probate package, for which I have yet to still transcribe the whole thing, because I haven't even started research notes for Hardy Winslow yet. I'm just at that beginning phase. But in reading through it, I found where it names Hardy Winslow and Hill Kiah Winslow, his son. So I've got it now. I have proven it, right? Have I proven it? Yeah, I think I have. Okay. So I've got plenty of evidence now to support Hill Kiah's relationship with Hardy, especially with that probate package, the land records. So what was happening with the land sale was that Hardy was ill. And in those land records where Hardy sells acreage to Hill Kiah, it says, take care of me. I'm selling you this land under the provision that you take care of me for the rest of my life. Well, he dies shortly thereafter, like in the same year. And so I think it was like 6 months later. And so now Hill Kiah immediately sells the land and moves to Cleveland County with his wife, where she dies. And then he remarries another Mary a couple of years later. He marries Mary Ann Spurlin. Again, I'm not going to go through all of the little details because it would take us 3 hours of conversation here. But this is kind of why putting all this together in research notes and a couple special projects helped me to determine that the Mary... Now, if you think about it, these women marry him, they become Mary Winslow. Both of them are going by Mary Winslow. And so I'm like, wait a minute, one died. What happened? So until I found the other marriage record for the other Mary Ann Spurlin, then everything started to fall into place. And no wonder he had so many children. So now it's time for me to repeat the process on Hardy G. Winslow. And so that is my future project on that. And I need to determine if this Christiana Phelps is in fact his wife. Let me introduce you to the Genealogy TV Academy. I am so proud of it. Now, this is where I teach skills. This will help you find ancestor after ancestor and help you go back generation after generation. These are skills you can learn. So my whole goal here is to help you organize your files, learn how to do record research, learn evidence evaluation. This is where we take one record and we evaluate it for its merits, and then we use those along with all of the record evaluations that we've done to correlate the evidence to help us determine what is fact and what is fiction. And research notes. Okay, so our documentation has to do a lot with research notes because this skill is a game changer in helping you break down those brick walls. These are research tools that we also talk about, whatever the cutting edge tools are that are coming out, and research strategies to help you find your ancestors, right? All of this is taught in live presentations on the first Wednesday of each month at 3 p.m. Eastern, and there is a Q&A day on the third Wednesday of each month at the same time, unless otherwise posted, okay? Yes, they are recorded in case you're working or can't make it for some reason. All the handouts that I have ever produced, I think, are in the Academy, and along with any worksheets that may go along with the different lessons, okay? So what's included is the live classroom twice a month, the Academy exclusive courses. There's all the Genealogy TV YouTube videos. That's both the primary channel and the new Genealogy TV 2 channel. All of those videos are now included for your commercial-free viewing on the Academy platform. All of the handouts and worksheets, the Insider Facebook group, which is a great community to help ask questions in between the Q&A sessions, and priority response to your questions. So if that is of interest to you, consider going to genealogytv.org/academy. Hope to see you in class.